All right, just give a minute for everybody to trickle in. But while we're waiting for, here's Sam.
Shawn, on your end, can you? Oh, okay, never mind. You got it.
Cool. Waiting for, we still got some more people trickling in here that are going to be speaking. But hey, so while we're waiting for everybody to kind of trickle in, uh, there's a lot of controversy around the emails that we received and the podcast that we released. And, I just want to say it was very timely. And we did receive the emails. And, we'll do our best that we can to prove that tonight. But, I released this early. Sam had an email roll in that got to Jeremy, my producer. And, we released it, and I think we did the right thing. There's a lot of distrust within the government. There's a lot of distrust within, especially the FBI. And we've seen attack after attack, the Vegas shooting. We saw the Covenant disaster that happened at the school, and none of these manifestos ever get released. And so we wanted to make sure that this thing got released. It did get released, and through our show, and nobody seems to trust the mainstream media anymore. And I think I did the right thing. I know I did the right thing. And even after that, we immediately got the information to the FBI, so that they can do whatever they need to do with it, which is hopefully dig into this and find what the hell was going on. But um, so we got a whole list of speakers here tonight. I'll just make some introductions here. Um, Shawn Ryan here, former Navy SEAL, former CIA contractor, host Shawn Ryan show. Um, then we got my producer, Jeremy Watkins, retired surface warfare officer in the Navy. We got Sam Shoemade, which everybody knows, the Army Intel Warrant Officer. Scott Mann will be in here soon. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Green Beret, very tied into intelligence. Former CIA analyst slash targeter. Sarah Adams, who I'm sure everybody knows. We have Jordan Carr, former Air Force intelligence. Rob Green, active duty surface warfare officer, is in here. He'll be speaking tonight. He's the one that actually got the story to us, to Jeremy. We got Kyle Seraphin, former FBI. We got Tim Parlatore, former Navy JAG officer and my current attorney. We got Dale Stark, who will be joining us, who also interviewed Sam, I believe, right about 24 hours after I interviewed him. Dale's a former A-10 pilot and drone pilot. We got, excuse me if I say this wrong, Matt Tardio, former Green Beret. Um, Tim Burchett will be joining us. He's a congressman out of Knoxville, Tennessee. He sent me a message that said he also received some emails from, it sounds like, from him. So he's going to come on hopefully and speak tonight. He's also put a lot of stuff in motion within Congress to stop the massive funding that the government's doing in the Taliban, and we discussed that several times on my show with Scott Mann, Sarah Adams, and Tim Burchett, and Eli Crane, and Legend, and Masood, who is the commander of the NRF, National Resistance Front in Afghanistan, fighting off the Taliban. We have Guido, who's a former Dutch intel officer and the author of AQ 2.0. And lastly, we have the anti-hero podcast guys coming on. Brent Tucker, he's former Delta operator, and he also received an email on their podcast uh, from the bomber, and sent that to me so that we could scrub our tens of thousands of messages that we get on there, to see if we received social media traffic from Matthew Livesberger, and we did, both on the Shawn Ryan account, my personal account, and on Shawn Ryan Show Instagram. So, which we posted those. So, um, I know there's a lot of other people that want to come on here, but there's a lot of kind of rhetoric going on online about this, and everybody that's on here that's going to get a chance to speak is a true professional. I only deal with professionals. I don't deal with internet trolls. I'm not going to deal with that kind of shit. So everybody that you'll be listening to tonight is a real professional in one way or another. So already went through why I released it, but and kind of how that came about. So just to tell that story again for everybody that's kind of chiming in. Um, Walked in the morning when I was getting kind of nervous to do it. So we applied a little bit of pressure and kind of talked him into it because all three of us thought it was really important, and he could have been spending time with his family that he was flying to go see at the time. But we talked him into coming on. We thought it was really important, and so he came on. We talked him into coming on. I conducted an interview with a medical doctor that day. Then when I got done, my phone was blown up with messages from people that have been contacted by Army CID, which is basically the Army's version of the FBI. And where's my notes here? So just for the record, we were contacted, and these are just the people that are probably in here right now listening. But CID contacted Tim Kennedy, texted me about it, and got me in touch with David Butler, who is the public affairs officer of the chief, the Joint Chief of Staff of the Army. And so I got in touch. I got Butler's contact info, gave it to Jeremy and my attorney Tim Parlatore to contact him. I didn't want to talk to him. I don't trust any of these people. Jeremy and Tim will talk on that here in a few minutes. The Scott Mann was contacted by CID and contacted me. Chris Peranto was contacted by CID and got in contact with me. Bo Ebenson, who used to video my show, was contacted by Clay Jensen, who was contacted by CID, and then the actual operative that we redacted from the show, which is why you see the whatever those are, those little lines that show spelling errors in the cursor. We had to redact some stuff out of that email to. We didn't want to blow anybody's cover. Like I said, I'm a professional. I've worked in intelligence, obviously, and no matter what the story is, I am absolutely 100% not going to blow an operative's cover, especially when he is currently serving overseas. That's just absolutely asinine for anybody to do that. And so that gets us kind of into the email. That's why the email, we had copied and pasted the email into Apple Notes to redact that name and the name of the major that was in there. And so when we did that, it automatically showed spelling errors. And if that makes any sense to anybody, and the space at the bottom where the picture, where there's like a little blank space, that's where the coordinates were. We pulled that and put it in a separate screen in the video so that you guys could see that in a way that was blown up a little bit, so it was a little bit more visible. The cursor that showed up that was in the screenshot, again, that's because it was in notes, so that we could screenshot or redact the names and put that in the actual episode and release it so that everybody could see that. And I want to say that the reason. Look, obviously, Livisberger had some some stuff that he wanted to get out, and we had mentioned at the beginning of the show that we could not verify that any of this stuff that was in that email was actually true or not, but we thought it was important to get it out to the public because if it would have went to the FBI, guess what, guys? It probably would have never hit the public. And like I'd mentioned at the beginning of this, there's been time and time again where people want manifestos released. Covenant School shooting here in Nashville is a perfect example. Everybody wanted that released, and they wouldn't release it. Now everybody's pissed off because we released the fucking email, and we did say that at the very beginning of the podcast that we couldn't verify if the information there was accurate, but there were a lot of things that lined up, like the operative that that wanted his name redacted. He also hit me on LinkedIn. We had to black his name out, black his phone number out. Like I said, I'm not going to blow anybody's cover. That's just a big no-no in the intel world. So hopefully there's at least a couple people out there that can respect the fact that we um, pulled through for him and did not blow his cover. But anyways, Jeremy, I'm gonna kick it over to you here for a minute. And is Tim on here yet?
He is. I've got to get Jordan in as a co-host to help me out here. Can you add that while I pass it over to Sam real quick?
Yeah.
You passing it off to me now, Jeremy?
Yes, please.
Okay. Didn't get a framework for what I'd be saying here tonight, so I'm kind of winging it right now. I just posted a screen record. I recommend you go look at my timeline. I screen recorded my Proton Mail app, and I walked through the timeline. I dropped everything down as specific as I possibly could to show when this stuff came in, okay? There's been a lot of big names and influencers out there coming after my credibility, attacking me, claiming that I fabricated this email. Of all the things you could attack me for, fabrication of the email doesn't make sense to me, simply because so many people have seen it at this point. The FBI has commented on it and everything else, but that is what it is. So they've come after me personally, attacking me, and I basically made the conjecture, and I want to get this single point across tonight. When you watch that video and you show the timeline, and there's no squiggle lines or anything else, this is a direct screen record of my Proton Mail app. And when you see the timeline, you will see that this person, who is either Matt or claims to be Matt, reached out to me on Sunday after they first contacted me on Instagram. They reached out on Sunday and sent that first message. You can read it directly in there. Everything is very easy to read. I spent plenty of time recording this. You go to the next message, and he gives the manifesto. He breaks down the manifesto, and that was on Tuesday, December 31st. Now, here's the thing. There are three options in my mind. Either I'm a fortune teller, and I can see the future, and I knew that he was going to do this thing, and I fabricated these emails to send them to myself before the action with proven timestamps, or I'm a deep state operative. I'm part of the CIA or whatever spooky services out there, and this was a very well coordinated and put together scheme to psyop the country, or I'm exactly who I say I am. I'm a recently retired Army veteran who has run a military whistleblower social media page for the last 4.5 years. I have dozens of articles that mention my name in them, and anybody who's halfway decent at doing a little bit of a deep dive can look into that and see that there are years of articles with my name mentioned in them as a source or whatever else. I would tend to go with the latter, but I understand how the internet is, and I want you to understand that a lot of the nonsense you're seeing out there is based on poor research, such as the squiggly lines on the Apple Notes page. This stuff could have been. I understand conspiracies, though, so I'll leave you with that. Whoever's up next, go ahead and take it, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. I'll say this last thing. I've tried to be as transparent as possible. I've given headers. I don't understand a lot of these things. So as far as somebody explained to give the headers from it, and basically all it did was say that it was a Proton Mail to a Proton Mail. I've taken screenshots of the box. I just recorded the video earlier. I've done everything I can to show you that this email was factually sent to me on these dates from this person who claims to be Matt Livelsberger, an individual who I didn't care about, that meant nothing to me until I read the news the next day. Well, until technically somebody sent me the news 2 days after the fact in the morning. But that name meant nothing to me, and I ignored the email initially until I saw, wow, this guy in my email is the same guy allegedly who committed these attacks. I'll leave you with that.
Shawn, do you mind if I jump in there?
Yeah, 1 second. I just want to say too that Vegas PD was aware of the email that we received on the podcast and talked about on the podcast, and they specifically said that they have strong evidence to me that the email was sent prior to the death. And we also received the email in my Zendesk, which is our customer service support that's attached to the website. We posted that. We posted the email from my G's personal on SRS. Brent Tucker, like I said, from the Anti-Hero podcast, sent me the email that they received from it. Tim Burchett, who hopefully is in here at some point, is going to talk about emails he received. But yeah, Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm going to start off by saying this: like, you guys 1,000% did the right thing by releasing that information in the time manner in which you did, and in the manner in which you did. You just presented it as you knew it being factual to you, that you guys ended up getting that email, that it came through, and it's a good thing that you did that, because now we have people from Anti-Hero, that have searched their inbox and are seeing similar messages as to what you had posted earlier about the email that you had received as it comes through. It's important in that aspect for people to keep in mind because of one of two things. Either number one, and I think Shu ended up coming out with like a very good way of framing this, that either Leibelsberger, or who was allegedly Leibelsberger, that ended up sending that email. I think it's very important to keep in that context. When we start analyzing this and we start looking at it, and the reason I'm happy it's documented and has been put out the way in which it did, is if it ends up coming out that Leibelsberger is not the one that ended up generating that email, then we have a lot of questions, because we do have timestamps, we do have the dates in which those emails were sent ahead of time. So if there is a conspiracy that's involved in this, if everyone wants to put on or take off their tinfoil hat, I don't care. But if there is a conspiracy that's involved in it, you did the right thing by making sure that it is documented ahead of time for all of that to be put out. If it's not a conspiracy theory and Leibelsberger did in fact send those messages, that's documented as well, and we have that on record. So that's very important to understand. The other thing that I'd like to bring up is, my role, my involvement as it goes into this situation with being a former team member, albeit for a very short period of time with Matt. But in addition to that, the information that got disclosed to me ahead of time back in December times two, that's twice, of active duty Green Berets who are associated not with just myself, but also Leibelsberger as well. And that information should not be public record. Like Shawn is saying, we're not going to go about and disclose information of people who are currently, out there doing the Lord's work for our nation. But those are all factual things that have been reported, and you're more than welcome to look into it. And so there, in my opinion, at least, there's a lot more that's going on here than to what meets the eye. And I'm not jumping into a conspiracy theory by any means, but I'm very happy that Shawn Ryan, I am happy that Jeremy, I'm happy that Shu, everybody was able to come forward with this information and present it, because however the cards may fall from this point forward, you guys did honest reporting on what it was that you had at the time that you had it. If people want to throw in conspiracy theories about squiggly lines, so on and so forth, etc., that's on them, and they're going to have to defend their own BS afterwards. You guys have your own records, you have your own documents, and you would be stupid to try to go forward and pretend like those emails didn't exist, that you didn't receive them, because obviously people like Anti-Hero Podcast, obviously, other people are going to start coming forward as they dig through their inboxes and end up finding them. So I'm going to leave it at that for the time now.
Hey, Shawn, can you add Jeremy back as a co-host? And real quick, for people that are requesting to speak, it's looking a little glitchy on my end. It might be the same on Jeremy's, which is probably why he was dropped. So please be patient.
Hey, let me add something before we continue any further. And I should have said this at the very beginning of the Shawn Ryan podcast, and I should have said this at the very beginning tonight. But I want to make this very clear. Matt kind of reminded me of this. Whatever Matt was dealing with, whatever Matt Livelsberger was dealing with, as far as where he was at in his headspace, he was somebody's family member. He was somebody's teammate. He had friends. He had family. Like, I want to offer my condolences to those folks right off the bat, because I deal with service members. I have been for years dealing with service members who are struggling from moral injury from what we've gone through, for decades in combat. The moral injury from the Afghan withdrawal, and what I've been told is that he was struggling with stuff. And whatever the case was, this was a human being who served his country honorably for years. And I don't want to take away from that. And I want his family and friends to know that, hey, my deepest condolences to you. And if I said anything or I did anything disrespectful to dishonor him, I apologize immediately. So I want everybody to know that I am in no way attacking this guy, but I felt like the information was so important it had to come forward. And I just want to say that.
Yeah, and I'd like to add on top of that, shoot, like in addition to that, he's a very well-respected and dedicated Green Beret. From the time in service that I knew him to all of the people that I'm currently talking to that, do know him on a professional level right now, they have absolutely nothing but good things to say. Whether or not the issues with his family are factual, that is up for debate at this current point in time. But from everybody's general standpoint, until something official gets put out, I would just ask that in an attempt to ease some pain and suffering that's taking place within the family, to let that kind of go away and just focus on the facts at hand versus rumor intelligence that's going to end up smearing or, clouding information and actual facts that are taking place.
Appreciate that, gents. Jeremy, is Tim in yet?
He is. We're trying to get him a speaker credit here. In the meantime, if I can just ask Kyle to talk about the process for sending the note to the FBI and why that us.
That got glitchy, but I got the gist of it. What, if you don't mind, Jeremy, I'm actually going to toss it over to Rob Green since he called me on Thursday, and I'll just let him say how he introduced me into any of this.
Yeah, appreciate that. Now, for context, real quick, I think my role here was very small, just connecting dots, connecting people. But I do, the reason I was involved in this is because of going back with Sam now for several years and trying to get at DoD corruption. I mean, the Department of Defense is sort of the gorilla in the room as it goes to government overreach and some of the problems that we have. And so we've seen now for years senior military leaders, our admirals and generals, harming service members, trampling their rights, betraying their trust. And then we have whistleblowers that they go after, they retaliate against. And so that's how I got connected with Sam and how we started building out networks of whistleblowers, networks of sources, trying to help hold people accountable however we could do it internally at first. And we realized that the institution, our admirals and generals, they protect themselves, they protect their careers, they protect the institution before the Constitution. And so we started going to the American people as much as we could. So that's the role, how we got connected. And then that morning, after Sam was informed that, hey, this is the same guy, he reached out to me to get in touch. He knew that I had contact with Jeremy because Jeremy and I connected over the COVID vaccine mandates in the military a couple of years before that. So he knew that I was in contact with him. So he asked to get in contact with Shawn Ryan. And then that's where, as Sam and I were talking through it that morning, the best thing to do, I said, hey, let's take a pause on this. Don't just call, FBI field office cold. Let me pull in Kyle. Kyle and I have connected. He's done an awesome job for so many of us service members, DoD whistleblowers, helping us raise awareness on some of the things going on in the DoD. I mean, he's doing an awesome job in the FBI too, but he's lending some of his support to us in the DoD as well. So I made sure to say, hey, Kyle's going to point us in the right direction. He knows the players here. And so I was able to connect Kyle to Sam to make sure that we got this into the right hands because there's still a lot of good FBI agents out there. So that's a good point at which to kick it over to you, Kyle.
Sure, sounds good. Okay, so by way of background, I worked for the FBI from 2016. I got out. Actually, I was suspended forever in late April of 2022. I was eventually removed, or I think they threatened me with termination, and I quote unquote resigned after 14 months of no pay and not being able to show up. I'd sold my house. I left the area where I was supposed to be working because I didn't work there anymore. That was April of 2023. I launched a podcast. I went on some interviews and stuff like that. So that's kind of who I am. Before all that happened, I did whistleblower activity that brought some things to Congress. I brought some things privately. Some of them actually are getting more and more relevant, and I'm going to probably bring this up later on with some other people. But the stuff that Sarah's talking about right now, some of the infiltration, some of the things that have come into our country were relevant to me back in 2021, and I brought that information to Congress, including the Afghan refugees. So that's kind of who I am. But the most important thing is that during that time, this was a combination of whistleblower activity and the fact that we were saying no thank you to the COVID vaccine, which a lot of people in the FBI lost their jobs, or at least they were threatened with them. I rounded up a group of people that were willing to kind of go on the line and say, hey, I'm not going to do this, and also we're going to support each other. And it was upwards of 300 people. It was a signal group. I'm sure it was infiltrated by the FBI's investigations, the internal inspection division. But what we found were a lot of people that were willing to step up and say, here's some information about what's going on wrong. These were all policy things. I got to have a pretty robust group of folks that understood right and wrong. Let's just leave it at that. So when Rob called me on Thursday morning, this is going back at the beginning or last week, Thursday morning, 8:45, I'm sitting at the breakfast table. Rob calls. He said, hey, you know Sam? I said, yeah, I know of Sam. We haven't spoken before, but I understand what Sam's about, and I understand that he's reputable. He's like, he's got this piece of information. It needs to get into the FBI's hands. Can you babysit this into the right spot? Can you make a connection so we're not just throwing it into what's called NTalk? If you guys don't know, if you go to the tip line, it goes to West Virginia. It goes to a low-level analyst. It could get lost in the thing. If you're not sending him a January 6th lead, it probably just disappears. So you want to make sure you get it into the right hands. I said, yeah, give me a few minutes. I'll get back to you with the number. Made a couple calls, called some of those agents from that 300 group that I was talking about, and started saying, hey, find me a reputable CT agent. Initially, I thought we needed to go to Denver because I thought that's where Matt was based out of. Eventually, they actually ended up getting me an agent, which was the supervisor in charge of the squad in Las Vegas. And the reason I'm giving you this background and the timeline is because there's a couple things that happened. Right after I found somebody in Vegas, which ended up being the squad supervisor that's doing the investigation into the explosion at Trump Tower, I talked to Sam, and his first statement to me was, I don't want to do this, and I don't really want to take it public. In fact, I would love to just give it to Shawn Ryan, let them run with it, but they're probably not going to want to just take something in a vacuum. And I told him, yeah, you're going to want to get out there and put your face on it, even though you don't necessarily want to do that. And Sam's initial thing that he told me, this was in the first 10 minutes we spoke, is that essentially everyone's going to call him part of the Glow Fed op, because that's what happens if you bring information forward. The problem that we're dealing with right now is so much distrust in the American media and the social media environment, and so many people feel like they've been betrayed by our government, that they look around and they say, we want transparency. And then when someone acts transparently, you're like, oh, you're in on it, because it's not exactly what you wanted to hear. And you're looking to punch through. Everybody wants to find the psyop, but maybe the psyop is that you just don't believe honest people. So I just want to tell you from the beginning, that's what Sam brought forward. And he was 100% credible to me on that. He never shared the document with me, which is on purpose. And I had to share that with the FBI. I didn't want to know. It was none of my damn business at that time. And I was not really interested in the details. I knew I could wait until Shawn and Sam sat down and had the conversation and shared it with the world. Now, here's the really important part about this stuff. If you just give something into the black hole that is the FBI, even with a warm lead, and you give it over to the supervisor, the SSA, in charge of the counterterrorism squad in Las Vegas, if they start asking questions and they start pushing down on someone like a Sam and say, hey, this is why we want you to keep that quiet, there's the possibility that that happens. And there are certain types of coercive behavior they could ask for, or they could sort of indicate. The upside of what Sam did was that he told them that he already had agreed to do, a public expose, that he intended to publish it and share it because it's the people's information and he's a private citizen. He also said the same thing on Twitter. He said the same thing when he was out talking to Shawn. So all of these things are really relevant. The craziest thing for me is when I was on the phone with the folks at the Bureau, and this is an indication of where we're at right now. And this is why you have to share stuff publicly to people. The people that I talked to at the FBI, one, they didn't know who Shawn Ryan was. And to me, that's actually fairly mind-blowing, to the point where I got a phone call the next day, and I've shared it with Jeremy, who's up here on stage. I shared it with Shawn. There is audio of them calling and asking for a confirmation of the spelling of Shawn Ryan's first name because they wanted to make sure they were thinking of the right Shawn Ryan. And then they asked me very explicitly, we don't know how podcasts work. This was the agent that was doing the interview. Can you tell me, how did the interview process work? Do they do them live? Are they taped? Like, how do you do it? I'm like, I'm not Shawn Ryan and I don't do his podcast, but I know how it works because I've seen it and I'm pretty confident they tape it and they edit it because he's got 3 camera angles. So, you're going to have to talk to Shawn about that, guys. The fact that you would have a federal investigator, an 1811 series with a top secret clearance working in counterterrorism, who claims not to know what the word VBIT is, or at least the initials of it, doesn't understand how podcasts work in 2025. You'd think that that is stranger than fiction right now. But that's part of the reason why it has to be shared and why you need to have this stuff in the public, because they applied pressure that you're not able to do otherwise. They did something that we didn't see at the Covenant School out there in Tennessee. It's stuff that doesn't get happen, like the Pulse nightclub. All of these kind of people who have written some kind of document, left some sort of format, and then we left it in the hands of the feds. You get this like convoluted bullshit because they do not feel like they owe you an explanation. That's the downside of the federal intelligence and the federal law enforcement side. They don't actually think they owe Americans anything. And if you guys have watched how they've behaved over the last couple of years, it's my single biggest gripe. This is America's information. They act like an intel agency and that their intelligence is basically a one-way street. And so what these guys did is really, really important. And I listened right at the beginning because I wanted to hear how it was presented. The presentation was as follows. It was the same thing that was said to me. We can't verify 100% what this is. Some of the information checks out. And if you're doing your job, and I think Shawn did a great job of doing this, it's like trust the audience. Here's some information. Here's a data point. Go out there and think what you want. He didn't tell you what to think. I listened. Sam didn't tell you what to think, and when he was making a speculation or giving his opinion, it was very clearly stated, this is my opinion. Here's what I think happened. Here's what might be the case. Here's some speculation. That's how intel people talk, folks. They talk in degrees of confidence. They don't talk about this definitely happened because who knows? We're talking about a digital trail. So that was the thing. Again, we have audio showing that the Bureau got this information, and I just want to bring up the insanity. He gave you kind of a couple different possibilities of being in part of the PSYOP or whatever. If you present information to the FBI while they're in the middle of a national, let's say a national spotlight criminal investigation, or a counterterrorism investigation, or something that involves explosives like this, and you present false evidence, you probably find yourself afoul of 18 U.S.C. 1001, which we usually refer to as the quote unquote lying to the FBI, but it's referred to as false statements. If you give them fraudulent and knowingly fraudulent evidence, you're probably looking at least a low level felony. Whether they'll charge it or not is another animal. That is a fully crazy thing for someone who walks around and has spent 20 years with a top secret clearance, who has worked in the intelligence space, who is not a dumb person, and Sam is clearly not. All you have to do is sort of look at his body of work. This is why you go, okay, fine. So this email obviously got there. The question is what does it mean? Who actually wrote it? Are they impersonating or are they legit? Was this someone in the middle of a mental health crisis, which was something that Sam and I talked about in the first 10 minutes? If you have a decent profile and you have the name, if you have a DOD background, if you have a law enforcement background, people send you a lot of mental illness. And so it's really hard to suss out, hey, is this legit or is this something that is just somebody's crazy fantasy? And a lot of times we don't engage with it. The fact that Sam actually engaged with this and got a little back and forth, it is a net good, a net positive for transparency, and it's a net good for the American people. That's all I'm going to that's it. And if you guys ever want to play the audio, Shawn, it's all yours.
Yeah, I'll actually post that audio after this live stream here. Kyle, I'm just curious. I mean, we're talking about they're not releasing anything. We talked about previous crimes that they've never released the manifesto, and it wound up getting leaked. Why do you think they haven't released all the information themselves that we presented them as soon as we got it?
So this, unlike a local law enforcement, people are used to seeing some big investigations, maybe a local shooting or like a mass shooting. What they'll expect is that there's a police chief and that person answers to a mayor and that person gets elected by, a pretty small group of folks. And those people want to know the answers. Same story with state police. They answer to state representatives. That can actually be handled pretty aggressively at a local level. And so a groundswell of interest is actually going to move the needle. The FBI is not burdened by that. They have an $11 billion budget, give or take, from Congress. You've seen the way that the deputy director, that's the number 2, and the director of the FBI go out in front of Congress and they thwart oversight. They just they don't even want to talk about things that are obvious and should be answered. Not even in closed session, you find out. They don't feel accountable to the American people. And that's the reason why, It's a massive problem with what is the FBI at this point. It's why we don't have answers about what happened at Butler, PA, not in a way that makes everyone feel really good about it. It's why we don't have answers about what happened at Mar-a-Lago or the golf course down in Florida. Any of these things are of national interest. But you'll notice is that it's a black bag, and people who've worked in local law enforcement know exactly what I'm talking about. The FBI tends to be a one-way street. It's like, thanks for the information. We're never going to tell you anything more. And that is a cultural thing. So you shouldn't expect it, at least not right now. There's no air of transparency. They're essentially a no factory. I've got a couple of open FOIA lawsuits where I've sued the Bureau for information that I know exists because people have told me what it was. And they won't surrender it, even though we know. And I've asked Congress members to help us out because it's about them. And they don't want to get involved because it's ugly. It's going to make them look, kind of silly. At the end of the day, you have a culture of people that are working to say no. They're either going to hide it behind classification or they're going to hide it behind exceptions to the FOIA, which is the Freedom of Information Act. They will use this ad nauseum and they will make you fight. My attorney and I have done at least a year's worth of litigation simply to get the opening and the closing of a slideshow called Congressional Investigations into the FBI by the 118th Congress, which I know is full of unprofessional information. 100% sure because I know people that were in the presentation and saw it. There's video of it, and they showed me them setting up the podium, and that's all I've ever gotten from them. So these people don't want to share this information. Again, what you guys did was pressure them and made them acknowledge that something exists because there was no way around it because your platform is big enough to actually do the squeeze. So double down again. Sam and Shawn did the right thing, and the fact that you guys get to even have a discussion about it as like the American people, that wouldn't be happening without this.
I appreciate that. Hey, I want to move over to Jeremy and Tim Parlatore. You guys spoke with the public affairs officer from the Joint Chief of Staff of the Army. Um, how did that conversation go?
Well, that was one of the weirdest conversations I've ever had with a public affairs officer. I mean, going to the authenticity of this, they obviously were, very desperate to reach out to us. So, they certainly had some information. But then once I got the guy on the phone, he really didn't seem to have the concept of what the content of the email was, and he really, obviously he's trying to protect the reputation of the army, but really what he was pushing me on was to say that, hey, this guy was a very well respected soldier, and everybody, they've interviewed everybody, up and down his chain of command, and they all respected him. They all said that, nobody saw this coming. He was a really, fantastic soldier. He was going to do, great things once he got out of the army, and he was very explicit to me that, he was concerned, or I guess the Army Public Affairs was concerned, that if this email was kind of a rambling, incoherent, mental health break, that it could be something put out to the general public, who would get the impression that, and this is his exact quote to me: "If you join the army, you're going to get fucked up." And so he was very much, wanting to make sure that Sean wasn't going to, um feed the narrative that if you enlist in the army, that you're going to end up as a, completely damaged person, which of course indicates he doesn't really listen to Sean that much. But it was just a very, very bizarre conversation. He offered that if we wanted to talk to, people within the chain of command to get a clearer picture of what a wonderful soldier he was, we could. And it was overall very odd back and forth.
Yeah, I just want to say, just so everybody knows, I mean, how seriously I take this. I brought Tim Parlatore on board at like 8 p.m. that night just to make sure I was doing the right thing. We checked into things. We looked at the email together. We verified that there was an incident in 2019 that did happen. And and I've done that with a number of episodes with you, Tim. I've sent you
Yep.
things and had you listen to it and say, hey, are we good to go with this? And 9 times out of 10, you give me the go ahead. So, thank you.
Of course. Yeah. Now, Sean is always very careful with these things. And he called me up that night with something that definitely wasn't on my bingo card for the week. And, we went through it. We pulled the the UN report on the 2019 incident, and we're able to verify that. Um, and then once we had that information, that's when I reached out to the Army Public Affairs officer and got his info.
Appreciate it, Tim. Matt, you got a question?
Yeah, the information that you all had stated on the podcast about the PIO, I believe it was Shu that ended up saying that the PIO had said that the DNA did not match his child. Did they actually come out and publicly make that statement, or did they just leave you all hanging with that?
No, so that was something that it was a very odd kind of statement to me because um yeah, as he's telling me about what a wonderful soldier he was, I kind of said, well, so what do you think this was? And he said, well, I don't want to speculate, but there might have been problems with his family, and then he tells me the story that when the FBI went to go identify the body, that to get a DNA match, they went to his closest next of kin, which is his infant child, and that the DNA did not match. And so they were speculating, well, maybe he got in a fight with his wife and found out that she was cheating on him. And I have no idea if that's true. I mean, quite
And
frankly, the two problems I have with that story: one, this guy is an active duty Army Special Forces soldier. They have his DNA on file to identify. You don't need to go to the next of kin. And two, if the child really isn't his, what mom in her right mind is going to offer up the illegitimate child for a DNA test in this case? So,
right,
and then I looked at the news reports and I saw that an hour earlier she had come out and said, "Oh no, I broke up with him because he was cheating on me." And
mhm.
so it struck me as more spin than anything.
Well, and Tim, here's my other problem with that, and I think Sean and a lot of the other people that are up here on this panel can all agree and concur with this, is that being a Green Beret, dealing with infidelity, dealing with marital issues is par for the course. Like that's not something that
Yeah.
causes GBs to spin out of control and go set off a damn suicide bomb over inside of Las Vegas at Trump Hotel. That to me struck me as something that, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because I just want to stick to the facts here. So as a matter of fact, I'm just going to stop myself.
Hey, Scott, can you talk about the conversation you had with Clay Jensen real quick?
Yeah. Hey, Sean. It's kind of similar to, I believe, what Kyle was saying, but I was not dialed into the manifesto or any of the stuff that you were working. I simply received um, some fairly urgent outreach. One from the actual operative himself, uh, with and who was talking about this possibly coming up, and it was news to me. So I immediately just gave you a heads up of, having talked to this individual and, just whatever you're working, just so there's potentially something that, might compromise him. I just want you to hear, what he said. And so that was the first one. And then Clay contacted me later that evening, um, separately, right, and just said that, as you had said earlier, he had similar, he knew this individual, he had concerns that if this dropped and his name was in it, that it could compromise what he's doing in the course of his work. And so both of those, I actually received it from two individuals, one the individual himself, and then let you know just as soon as I could, kind of in the blind, and then you took the actions to redact.
I just want to say again too that that brought a lot of the fact that so many people got contacted by CID or friends of the operative. I mean, brought a lot of legitimacy to the story. And then when we lined up, the 2019 incident, what it was, what was in the UN report, that it was airstrikes on drug, what are narcotic type buildings. When I pulled up the individual's profile on LinkedIn, sure as shit, there it was that he was in some kind of anti narcotics unit. So, Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to point out as well that from my own personal knowledge, I know he was, number one, not in numerous province, which doesn't necessarily negate the fact that he claims that he developed, what was it, over 120 target packages over there. But in one statement, he ends up saying, and this is where I think a lot of people are having issues with that email. In one statement, he's talking about US 4A, saying that, you know, US forces Afghanistan only ended up executing about 50% of those targets that he ended up developing. And in the very next breath, he ends up coming out and saying that US 4A is trying to cover up a bunch of CivCas or civilian casualties that ended up taking place. So they're two contradictory statements, both within the same breath, if you were to read it straight through. One where US 4A is executing these targets in which he developed, but also that US 4A only executed about 50% of the targets due to civilian casualty concerns. And then in the following statement, it ends up coming out that, you know, he's talking about scrambling all aircraft across CENTCOM in just a couple minutes, which is absolutely absurd for anybody that's ever been over there and knows just how vast CENTCOM is and how long it takes to actually bring aircraft into that theater. So I think those are a lot of the issues that end up being arisen from, you know, that particular statement within itself. And I'm very curious to hear your gentlemen thoughts on that.
I think you bring up a lot of good points there.
Right. I mean, if we're going to be complaining about civilian casualties from US 4A, which most people over inside of Afghanistan, if they've fought inside of Afghanistan, they know for a fact that the rules of engagement were restricted to the point where a lot of service members were actually complaining that it was putting their lives at risk in order to save civilian lives. And that was a major complaint throughout the entire, you know, war inside of Afghanistan, Iraq, or the global war on terror, regardless of what theater you were in. But to say that there was over 120 targets that he had packaged and about half of them were actually executed and then claim, you know, a massive CivCas and cover up, to me, that information doesn't jive, you know, as a former teammate, as a Green Beret, and everything that goes in, not to mention him talking about US 4A and not SOTFA or Special Operations Task Force Afghanistan connected to the cover up. It's really odd to me. You know, I had a situation, and I'm not going to give a particular year that this ended up occurring, but it did end up making international news where I was very well aware of an entire ODA that ended up getting wiped out with personal close friends on it. And what ended up happening, and just to give an idea for everybody here that is listening, how many ever thousands are in here listening right now, you know, this gentleman's entire ODA ends up getting wiped out, for lack of better terms. Multiple wounded, multiple killed, everything happens. International news hits, and they're talking about, you know, thousands, excuse me, not thousands, excuse me, dozens of civilians that ended up getting killed in the crossfire, and saying that this particular special forces team ended up killing all these civilians. And I will tell you, as the senior person on the ground was laying in a hospital bed that just had a tube ripped out of his throat, Special Operations Task Force Afghanistan had sent down an investigation officer to determine whether or not the claims that the Taliban had made on international news that mainstream media outlets such as CNN had published were already in there trying to dig at the truth. Well, this guy is hyped up on freaking opioids and all sorts of other stuff because of the multiple gunshot wounds that he has to his body. And so to pretend like civilian casualties are not taken seriously, not just within SOCOM, but also within like U.S. forces Afghanistan, I think is kind of telling of possibly who the author of that letter is. And it definitely doesn't lead towards being a Green Beret, at least in my opinion.
Well, I can definitely agree with a lot of what you said, but the thing is that the emails did come in before January 1st, and they did say that
Right.
this had to go out before January 1st, and now we all know what happened on January 1st. And
Right.
so, you know, I think the guy was definitely struggling with something that happened in 19.
Right. And, you know, that would be true, you know, except for the fact that I have also spoken with the person that leaked out the information about the Signal chat safety number, as well as the name on Signal being changed after the fact, after the detonation took place over inside of Las Vegas.
Yeah, I want to talk about that too, Matt. Keep going, but I want to reference that.
Yeah. If Shawn, do you want me to go deep into this, or do you want me just to brush over it? Because there's more about this that I haven't brought up to the public. I talked about it a little bit in my space last night, but I didn't fully disclose it yet.
No, I'd love to hear it.
Okay. So there is obviously, the information that ended up getting put out on 4chan Twitter about his Signal safety number and also his name being changed over inside Signal, one which took place on the 29th of December and another one that took place following the detonation itself. What is really concerning to me about this entire situation is somebody that has the ability to change a Signal safety number following the detonation where we know Matt Leibelsberger is dead. When we start talking about the ability to send out emails and everything else, which is why I said I'm very thankful for guys like you and Shu putting this information out ahead of time to make sure it's on public record that is undeniable. When we start presenting information like this, it's almost undeniable in that extent that how did his Signal safety number get changed? Signal is supposed to be one of those, secure messaging apps that has yet to be hacked, at least what's known to the public. But there is additional information that hasn't been released to the public yet, and we're holding it very, very tight because a lot of the people that ended up disclosing this are still on active duty. And Matt had just back in November, and when I say Matt, I'm talking about Matt Leibelsberger, back in November of 24, had just moved into this new drone position, had just completed some of his initial training into it. He was also in a group chat over on Signal that commonly discussed drones and things with drones, and a lot of the messages that he had ended up posting inside of that Signal chat, which has dozens of members inside of it, ended up getting deleted. And those messages would suggest that he was not at all competent when it comes to drone operations or robotics. If anything, they pointed to the fact that he was a novice in it. Some of the things that are still on record that are in that particular chat are showing that he had a very basic understanding of it. And when he posted them, he was excited, like, hey, everybody check this out. While everybody was also like, yeah, that's great, Matt. We're already well aware of that. Like, welcome to the freaking club, pal. And so there is some very serious issues. So we're not saying that these emails were not sent to Shawn. We're not saying these emails were not sent to Shu. We're not saying that they're not sent to Anti-Hero Podcast, but we're saying these things need a much deeper look taken before judgment is drawn.
Yeah, and to echo that plus rehash what I talked about in the podcast, people have asked me my opinion whether this email came from Matt Leibelsberger. And I have said yes. And the reason why is at least from his phone, at least from his device, the device had access to this. Maybe not from him physically, but from his device. The reason why is because when I saw those Signal chats leaked on the internet, I went into my Signal chat and I showed this on the Shawn Ryan podcast, and I had the same exact matching safety number change on mine. And that took place on the attack happened on Wednesday. It took place on Thursday. I screenshot that on Thursday, and it shows, safety number, or this happened. He made contact with me on such and such date, and then there was a blank, and then it showed safety number change. And I said, that's the same freaking thing these had. And people said, well, how do you know that Signal chat is from Matt? And I said, because it matches people who knew him. People who knew him prior to this incident knew that they were talking to Matt. They were speaking to Matt. So either Matt sent that Signal message, therefore confirming that he sent that email as well, or somebody had his device prior to that first initial contact on
Right.
Sunday.
And that's something that I'm going to back you up on this, right? Like, I have well vetted that source and know for a fact who that individual is, and that they had, distinct and intimate information that leads to that. And so for people to say that that did not occur or that that is false information is bullshit. I don't know how else to state that. People might start painting us as conspiracy theorists, but at the end of the day, it's a fact that that happened, and it's a fact that that occurred. In the deeper known fact that people do not know yet, which I have held on to very, very closely, and this information has been sent out just in case something happens to myself, family members, anything else, and they've got an ability to get that information out to where it needs to go in the event of that case, that what I had just talked about is already well documented and well distributed. So if anybody wants to play FAFO games, we have that information that's already been passed out, that already is, we'll just call it protected. And if that information for some reason becomes compromised, my life, my family's life, everybody else's lives become compromised. And I'm saying that for a reason, because something happened to my wife last month that's connected with this case, that that information will get out. So fuck around and find out.
Hey, I want to bring up something else that I think that should be talked about sometime during this podcast that I'm not comfortable with. And maybe somebody could immediately answer this question, but I haven't seen it. So they said that they found an iPhone, and no other phone was recovered, at least that was not reported by the FBI. He might have had multiple phones, which is very, very plausible. However, he was contacting me from that Proton email account and from that Signal chat. And you can't jump Signal chats to different phones. The Proton email on that fourth slide that I distributed, and I still have it in my email, has the signature line sent from an Android, sent from the Android Proton Mail app. That is an issue I have, because that was clearly sent, unless somebody went in there purposely for a ruse, changed it to say Android just to throw it off, or for some reason, I can't even imagine why. They said that they recovered an iPhone, but that email was sent from an Android. That still hasn't been answered to me, so I don't know.
So when it comes to the phone thing, it's worth noting that the Bureau has the ability to act like so many other intel type agencies do, but certainly a lot of law enforcement, the ability to jump in there and access a phone of somebody who's deceased. That's not crazy, especially if they had other devices that they were going on. And you can imagine the minute that they had an ID, especially if they found a physical ID like we're being shown. I have all the same questions you guys do about things that survive fires, but fires are weird, explosions are weird, and things that survive it are also pretty strange if you have friends in the fire world. The fact that they would, or the idea that they wouldn't send somebody either in a what's called CART or a CAS team member out there immediately to start exploiting devices to try to figure out, because once something happens like that, you don't know if that's the only thing that's happening, if there's something else in play, if somebody's a victim, if they're a perpetrator. Like, all the questions happen as an investigator, especially stateside. So someone jumping onto a laptop and being able to access that, somebody accessing another phone that also has the profile. And Sam, I've got Signal, the same Signal account on multiple phones. You can have a couple devices. I can't remember how many, but I have buddies who are goofy and spooky, or they just like changing technology, and you'll get them updating, with the same phone number but different phones that they're cycling through. It'll update the safety number. So there are potentially some very non um, exciting reasons why that could be the case. That could be related to the investigation. And obviously, it could also be that somebody had either cracked, hacked, or stolen the device and was operating with it. I think the thing that I was most interested in watching a lot of the online chat, because I watched this, and thankfully, Sam, it sounded like you were tuned out, so good for you. But there were a lot of people asking about the credibility of what it was that you did. Would it be fair to say that on this panel, including Matt, and Matt, it sounded like you had some questions early on, you're fairly confident that Sam received an email and then brought it forward in good faith. Shawn, same story, and everybody would basically exposed it. And then who wrote the email and whether it's true or not, those all can be debated. But we're not talking about the sort of the integrity or the veracity of the folks that brought it forward in good faith. Would that be fair for everybody?
Yeah, Kyle, that's fair. I mean, I don't think the integrity of Shawn can be called into question at this point, or Shu, when it comes down to, hey, this email was sent and received by both of these individuals, along with multiple others, and those statements are corroborating, and they're prior to. And Shu made a very valid point earlier on when he said, look, I would have had to have forecasted this. I have to have, like, his tarot card game has got to be on flipping point in order to have that email sent ahead of time, knowing that this stuff was coming down the pipeline. Right. So it's just inconceivable to myself or anybody else that would be the case. And, there's some other things too. If we're sitting here saying that maybe it was, or maybe it wasn't Matt that ended up sending the email, but let's assume for the second that it was Matt and he was going to end up pulling this off. There was 2 references to the email that Shawn and Shu ended up sharing on that podcast. And those 2 references referred to Mexico and his ability to go down and get into Mexico. And of course, what was on his person or within the vehicle when it detonated was a passport. And there's a lot of people that are questioning the military ID and passport for having minimal damage or burn damage that got done to them. And I think it's important, if you want to talk about it, you're more than welcome to, or I can talk about it from a former, law enforcement or 18 Charlie perspective of how things like that could actually survive a blast. It's not inconceivable. It's up to you, Kyle. I don't know if you want to take it or if you want me to take it, but I know that's one of the other things out there that people are losing their minds about.
I put it as a data point where you can ask the question, but it's not definitive. Like, people's bodies block blast, fire skips over stuff. I've seen pans melted, but paper survived in the same damn cabinet. It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
There's a lot of logic when you start applying high heat, pressure, explosive forces into things. You just, like, things survive that shouldn't. It's just all about how the actual physics played out at that moment in a specific space that you can't recreate most of the time.
Right. And
that's been the way I've seen it.
Yeah. And to give somebody just a general understanding or idea that's sitting in here listening to space right now, if he had his military ID and or passport in his back pocket sitting in his butt cheek up against the seat, and that military identification card was sitting inside of a leather wallet, obviously it's going to have a hell of a lot less damage than something that was sitting on, for say, the passenger seat. And so understanding the difference between those things and where they actually collected the evidence from will give you an understanding for why certain things survived.
The last thing I wanted to throw out there too is that if Sam had not brought this to the bureau right away, proactively before going on Sean's, I think the order of operations here, one, it was crucial. It's worth noting it, and that's kind of why what I wanted to add to it. But as far as timeline, but also it was a really big CYA, because if you had gone out there, Sam, and let's say shared this on Sean's podcast for clout, which I don't believe you did because you told me you didn't want to do it, and you actually sounded really concerned about how this was going to affect you.
I was
And I know the
terrified,
kind of
man.
anxiety this
I
had.
did. I'm an introvert, and people think that I did this for clout or something. Like, dude, I do not want this kind of notoriety. Absolutely
And
not.
I'll
Please leave me alone.
and you said the exact same thing to me the first time we talked, and there's no reason to, I had no reason to doubt it. I was like, yep, I know how exactly that feeling of anxiety that like this is going to suck and I have to do it because it's the right thing. If he had not shared that with the feds up front, if he had not put that in law enforcement's hand, you can expect one of two things would have happened. I guess three things. There could have been a voluntary knock and talk asking for access to his computer. There could have been a search warrant served to go get that information and taken out of his devices, or they could have done a subpoena and they could have gotten records, online or otherwise. And we can't rule out that they would do that anyway. They still might do that sort of thing. So for whatever that's worth, you might find that out. But at least you headed it off at the pass and said, I am proactively volunteering this information before talking about it. And by the way, it's going to be public. Again, the pressure that puts on a bureau that doesn't, you've seen what they do in public affairs. You saw what they did in New Orleans, where a girl's up there talking, and I don't know what else to call her because she's younger than me. She says, specifically, we don't want you to walk on this street. Like, these people are getting out in front of the cameras foolishly. You know that they don't know how to handle a little bit of pressure. And so you guys did the right thing. You apply pressure. So the public is at least going to have a shot at learning something that's going on in this investigation, that there's going to be a little bit of a positive push.
Well,
Yeah, and
in the
Kyle,
mindset. No, go ahead.
Let me back you up for a sec, man, because you've been catching a lot of shit lately when it goes to media. I don't know your background. I don't follow you. I don't know a damn thing about you other than when I saw you on Shawn Ryan. And you may very well have some discrepancies in your past that I'm not aware of, and that's all fine and dandy. But at the end of the day, you actually said something that I also feel on my scale, which is I almost feel like I have been thrust into this because of the events over the last month that have taken place in connections with Livelsberger, that this is not a position that I want to be in, but I also feel duty bound almost to report and talk about this. It's got the potential to ruin your entire, your entire, how do you want to say it? Your entire reputation. And that is something that, as far as myself and inside of the community is concerned, is invaluable. You cannot put a dollar amount on my reputation inside of the community. I give a damn how much money you fucking pay me, what you tell me, or what you promise me. My reputation means the world to me, and I will do my best to protect it. So when I am putting information out like this and I'm talking about these things, you better damn well believe that both myself and the community are standing behind these statements, that this is not stuff that we willingly will thrust in the open to be in the spotlight because we think that it is going to somehow potentially help us. If anything, it scares the shit out of us, and it's not something that we want.
Yeah, exactly. There was never any ask for donations to anything. There was never, any kind of personal gain is like you said. Right now, I'm being scrutinized, and I said this on the Dale Stark podcast. You take a guy like, you take a big public figure who's been out there in the spotlight for the last couple of decades. People know if they like him or if they hate him already. And so when they do a story, they might shit on the story, but they're like, yeah, I like this guy or I don't like this guy, and they move on about their day. Right now, nobody knows who I am. So they're punching me into who they want me to be. And it sucks. And I knew this would be the case. And I told my wife at the time, and she actually told me not to do it. She said, just give it to the FBI and wash your hands of it. And I contemplated it. And the thing that drove me to do this was the same thing that drives me to have done the stuff I've been doing for the last 4.5 years. It's a pursuit of justice. And I'm not trying to sound like I'm not trying to sound like a white knight here, but it is the pursuit of justice, pure and simple. How many times have we seen the FBI withhold manifestos or any other kind of document from the public? And we're like, damn it, tell us what the freak is going on. Why did this person do this mass attack? Why did this happen? And the FBI won't tell us anything. And the last time I saw something was Steven Crowder. He got that manifesto from a whistleblower, and man, they just about burned the world down to find out who that whistleblower was. But I was like, that belongs to the public. The public is owed that manifesto. It is ours. We need to know what is going on in our country, in our schools, on our streets, because we are a people of the republic, by the republic. You know, we own this country, and these people act like we don't. And I'm like, I have to take this to the public. I know I'm going to get excoriated for this, which is what's going on right now. But the people are owed this regardless. So let me calm down a little bit here. But that was the mindset behind all of this.
Yeah, and I think that's just the general sentiment across the U.S. population right now, especially when we look at videos from the Las Vegas hotel, right? Why are we only seeing tiny segments? Why are we not seeing the videos of him driving up to the scene? Why are we not seeing all of those things from these different points of view that would either confirm or deny whether or not his, let's say, hands were bound? That would kill a hell of a lot of conspiracy theorists right off the get-go. And I understand the intimacy that it comes with the family and making sure that we're not showing him, taking his head off, for lack of better terms, in front of the public. I wouldn't want to see that disclosed, on a public platform, but I almost feel like that's what it would take to calm a lot of this down.
Hey guys, I want to jump over to Dale Stark. Dale just interviewed him I think it was about 24 hours ago. And Dale, I was just wondering if you got any inconsistencies that you want to share, or if you learned anything new.
Yeah, no, really the reason I wanted to talk to Shu after you interviewed him and this all came out was that there was a lot of narratives kind of taken off that really diverged from what you guys had said in the interview, which for the most part you guys have already addressed. So, nobody validated the legitimacy of the message or who sent it. And I thought that was all very clear. And I, again, just wanted to give a platform to Shu to expand on that a little bit more.
Hey Dale, while you're on here, we've gotten some questions. One is regarding the vehicle that Matt spoke about in the email to Sam. Can you talk about how you said that you've received information from others about his ISO prep? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I spoke with a current active duty, highly decorated sergeant major in Special Forces, and he told me that the bona fides in the email matched his ISO prep. So I don't have obviously any information of that myself, but that was told to me right before I talked to Shu. So I was actually wanted to open that up to the group and ask anyone else because there, a lot of people were talking about that, and there were some inconsistencies on his registration record. If that was maybe indication that he didn't send the email, or if it was accurate. And I'll just leave it open if anyone wants to answer that.
Yeah, I'd like to, I don't know how to say this. I'd like to jump up for a sec because I think it's important to the storyline, and it's something that is a little known fact that a lot of people need to be aware of. So Matt has connections to Ukraine, as do I. I was one of the first SF guys to go over to Ukraine back in 2015, laid the groundwork for everything that's to be seen currently to this day. Matt ended up following suit over behind us. Now, last month, because of the podcast that I run over on YouTube, I had made an announcement that I was going to end up going over into Kursk, Russia, by invitation of the Ukrainian military to document the dead DPRK soldiers that were over inside of Russia. And within a day of me making that announcement, I ended up getting contacted by somebody that is pretending to be an active duty SF member, and we're going to leave the details out of it. But they had intimate personal identification information of Green Berets, not only on where Matt, the team that Matt was currently serving on at that time, but also in addition to that, had also taken over Matt's position. And if we fast forward just 1 to 2 days, my wife ends up falling dangerously ill with a neurological condition that we can't explain. The neurologist can explain. MRI, CT scan, cerebral spinal fluid, blood draw, everything else ends up coming clear and doesn't explain why this ends up taking place. And all of this occurs immediately following my announcement that I'm going to end up going over into Kursk, Russia. So not only do I get contacted by somebody that has intimate details about this ODA down to personal identifying information, but now my wife very, very ill and ends up having to get hospitalized for about a week, to which she still to this day is having issues. Now, within 24 hours of her getting out of the hospital, I get contacted again via a different, it was a text messaging app this time, which I got contacted on, again, disclosing other personal identifiable information about current active duty Green Berets who are holding similar positions and have also ties to myself and Matt L. All of that takes place, and now we have this coming out. And so to me, when I start judging and I start looking at what's taking place right now, there is somebody out there that has information about active duty Green Berets, whether or not we want to talk about it or not openly, publicly on this forum. And we have, Matt Leibelsberger over here that has now committed this act that most people that know him, as a matter of fact, every single individual that I've spoken to that knows him, there's not a snowball's chance in hell that he would have flown off the rails to this extent. With that being said, there's something else I want to address. There's a lot of people talking about like mental health issues with him and saying that, okay, well, maybe he had PTSD, maybe he had a traumatic brain injury, maybe he had these other things that caused him to fly off the rails. And it's something that I've spoke about publicly when I talk about PTSD or anything otherwise. My last deployment to Afghanistan, I was on 300 milligrams of Zoloft, and that was sanctioned by the military. Now, for those of you who don't know, max dose of Zoloft comes in right around 200 milligrams. And I was like 150%, beyond that. So for them to sit there and say that, PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, any of this is a huge cause that goes into it. No. When I look at this, I can't explain, the things that have happened when it comes to disclosing personally identifiable information. But my question is, if somebody has the ability to disclose PII like that on, different Green Berets that are currently active, while at the same time, those GBs, including myself, have connections to Matt, and then we have this happening. And in addition to that, we have a bunch of stuff in the emails that are allegedly tied back to Matt. I'm not even saying that they don't. I would bet you that the frickin', server sent from, address, everything matches up perfectly. If somebody is capable of gathering that type of information and putting that type of information out, what the hell are we dealing with here? That would be my question.
Hey guys, I'm
And
gonna
it left people speechless.
yeah, it did. I'm gonna remove a couple of speakers here and bring some more on. And there's a couple other people that want to speak. So right now, I'm gonna open it up to trying to get the anti-hero guys in here to talk about the email they received. Ian Carroll, go ahead.
What's up, guys? Thanks for bringing me up. I just have one quick question that you guys kind of touched on just a second ago, but I wanted to kind of get some clarification, like kind of more plain English. And it's about the email sort of like self-identifier of his first car. And the internet sleuthed through his records, and it seemed to be not the right year for the right make and model of his car. You guys have a ton of experience in this world. Does that mean anything to you guys in the special forces world that he misidentified the year of his first car, or is that just kind of like noise?
I think Kyle can take this one. He'll explain what the isoprep is and how that the car.
I was going to say one of you other guys should do it. Look, if you ever gone through a SEER training, if you have a flight crew background, they have a thing that's called isolated personnel report. So the whole idea is that there's a questionnaire that you fill out so that if you are isolated from friendly forces and you have rescue teams come in various different formats, they're going to basically treat you as hostile until they can verify your personality or who you are. So they're going to go through these questions. And the weird thing is that it's whatever you answered. So maybe Matt maybe Shawn can say the same thing. I know some people that never give real information on that because it's not something they want looked up. They actually give deliberately false information on a regular basis. If you were to go to find out what my birthday is, you'll find I give the same fake birthday like pretty much everywhere because I just don't like using my real birthday. And I don't know why it is. Maybe it's because I watched a Robert Redford movie one time. So some dudes will literally just give you legit fake information that they will remember that nobody else can validate except them. And that is equally useful for verifying as long as it matches what's on that ISO prep document. And then when the friendly forces come to link up with them. You guys may have different experience with that, so I'd be totally happy to hear it. But I know guys do that. I've got friends who are Green Berets. My last partner was as well. It's not uncommon for people to kind of have like their own little weird quirks when it comes to like how I'm going to keep my information safe and secret that nobody can fake. By the way, Matt, when you were talking about the hacking capability and being able to access that info, we're talking about nation state capabilities. We're not talking about,
Correct.
generally speaking, like individuals. It's just worth kind of tossing that into the fire too.
Yeah, I'm 100% pointing to that, you know, or at least alluding to it, that you're talking about either essentially a foreign intelligence service that would be capable of doing that.
Great explanation, Kyle. Thanks. That's not the kind of thing that anyone in your guys' positions could access his sort of like expected ISO prep answers, is it? That's like that's proprietary, and we wouldn't know if he gave the answer that he's supposed to give or not.
Correct.
Well, Dale did confirm with somebody who is able to access it, but no, we can't. That stuff is not, you know, we're not going to publish
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Thanks for the answer, man. Appreciate it. I'll drop back down.
You want to take? Is there any questions in the chat?
One question is, do you think that the email that was sent to Sam is the same as the letters that were allegedly found on the phone?
I can't answer that. I have no idea.
Yeah, pure speculation. Who knows?
It sounds like, and Kyle did mention that the FBI does have the ability to access certain devices and stuff. So, you know, I'm not sure.
For whatever it's worth,
Right on.
just because you're talking about speculation, they don't look like the same writer at all. They would look like somebody who had a completely different personality, or maybe somebody who, like, the sentence structure is different, the lexicon, the type of words being used, the formation of thoughts and ideas, the length, the topics, completely different. They don't, you know, do people change that dramatically? Not usually, for whatever it's worth. When you start looking into people's writing samples, there's a reason why you can go back and look at them and go, okay, fine, this likely came from this side or not the other. When you look at them, they don't look like they came from the same person. Now, I didn't know Matt at all, and maybe somebody who knew him could say, oh yeah, that's the way that he talked if you got him offline. He went off on political rants, but that's kind of not what you see a lot of guys that are in the, you know, there's not very many people in the military that talk like that, let alone people who are special operators. It's just not, it looked like bad AI generated like right-wing talking points if I was going to speculate on it. So it would be reasonable to assume that it probably came from different sources. Now, what that source was, who freaking knows?
One of the questions that we've gotten has been, have any of the people who've worked with Matt reached out to either Shawn or you, Sam, with regarding the details of what was written in that email, or specifically just about how he was a good guy?
So I checked my social media within first day after I did the Shawn Ryan podcast, before things had started really blowing up. And I had somebody who was very close to the family reach out with some information. And beyond that, I'll be honest with you, I haven't checked my social media in the last 24 hours because these assholes have been dragging me through the mud, and I just don't care to read all the garbage out there. So I couldn't tell you. There's probably a lot of stuff in there, but
You know, I will tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, like we had mentioned, we talked to the public affairs officer for the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the Army, and they wanted to make sure that we understood that he was an upstanding soldier, a great leader, that he was moving on into retirement, and was going to improve the future of warfare, is what they said. But they were pretty adamant that they wanted us to know that.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, Shawn, you know, like, not only did I serve with the guy, but also have had several other people reach out to me that currently have. Nobody trusts the freaking media. Nobody trusts any three-letter agency at this point in time. So we all just kind of like lean on ourselves and the people that we know. Everything that we know about him is, number one, he was very family oriented, loved his family to death, loved his wife, loved his brand new child. Two, while he may have been a supporter of Trump, he was not ultra MAGA in any way, shape, or form. And these are all things that have been asked to convey, that he was not ultra MAGA in any way, shape, or form. He was just a regular person that kind of believed a little bit in what he, you know, saw going forward with the future president. And that he was also very mission dedicated, that he spent a lot of his time, even more time than he should have, to make sure that the mission succeeded, whatever mission that may have been, which is why we talked about his signal chat and the message that he sent, and just being excited to learn a new craft. and I'm going to take anti-hero stance on this and not get into his family dynamics, but he respected his family to the point where he was moving on to new positions that would allow him more time with his family, because he respected his wife and his family to that extent.
I have to say this, and the two people that I did talk to, and one even went to the Fox course with him and said he was the smartest guy in the Fox course. You can, yes, you can have great past performance, but when it doesn't guarantee you, a life without issues, and it can come on fast and it can come on quick. And I just don't, again, I know this is, opinion based, but if indeed it ended up being, he some sort of a mental breakdown, just because he was a good guy at one point, of his career and very mentally sharp, doesn't mean that gets to stay with you. And I hate to be, the pessimist about that, but I just want to bring in the reality of that.
No, I think the saying is 1-0 shit ruins 100 attaboys.
Well, everybody, I appreciate you being here. I think we pretty much covered everything I wanted to cover with the emails, with the podcast, with the information that's going around. I think we probably cleared up a lot of the questions for anybody that's listening, and hopefully this information gets disseminated out. And once again, we talked to Kyle. We got the emails to the FBI. I think everybody on here is on the same page that we did the right thing by releasing this. Otherwise, it never would have been released. We brought up several examples where the FBI's held it out, and so if it happens again, I would do it all over again. I think we did the right thing, guys. I'm gonna end this. So it's been a long night. We've all been here. We brought a lot of intel out. We've covered a lot of questions. We brought a lot of answers to some of the confusion that was going on. I appreciate everybody showing up. This was pretty big. We had, I think, 35,000 people on here. So once again, I brought on a all of these people are professionals, and that's who I like working with. So I appreciate everybody showing up, especially the speakers. Thank you all for giving me your time and your insight into this whole thing. And I appreciate it.